Bungie was back this week with their big weapons update related to Season 15, going into the details of the upcoming changes, including the introduction of Stasis legendary weapons, exotic changes, the Anarchy nerf, also a huge buff to Vex Mythoclast. Well, today I'm going to round up all the changes so you know what to chase in Season 15. Well, let's dive into the update from Bungie on Thursday the 19th of August 2021. So this week at Bungie, we're talking about weapons. So next week's update is ushering in a new season, a big sandbox update to go with it. And we've already covered ability tuning here, armor and mod changes. And now it's time to go over what changes are going to happen with the weapons. So here is weapons feature lead Chris Proctor with a full rundown. So Chris goes on to say, we've got a lot to talk about for Season 15, including Stasis Weapons, a rework of fusion rifles, several changes intended to make certain weapons more relevant in the new activity. So Chris does go on to clarify a few terms. So you can check out that on Bungie.net if you want to go into that. But first of all, we've got the global changes. So Season 15 introduces legendary Stasis Weapons, and we've seen some concern about how these are intended to work, particularly in PvP. So here are some details. So Stasis Power Weapons, they are in the power slot, but all other Stasis Weapons are in the kinetic slot. And this is to avoid the overcrowding in the energy slot, and so that it's reasonable to use one in match game content. So the kinetic slot won't be renamed at this time. Stasis weapons don't intrinsically do anything different from weapons of other damage types, but they are the only weapons that can roll with stasis perks. And we generally intend stasis perks with slowing or freezing effects to have a kill trigger, and this is being easy enough to trigger in PvE and fun to use but not obnoxious to play against in PvP. So I would imagine that's going to be something like the Cryosthesia exotic weapon within the season, but we haven't got long to wait to find out, so looking forward to those Stasis weapons. Well, now that we've addressed Quickdraw's permanent 100 handling buff, we see more people using the quick swap glitch, so Bungie have fixed that glitch and you're no longer able to do it. Well, next up we've got some changes to primary ammo, and now primary ammo is going to be infinite. So running out in hard PvE content or because you were on a tear in PvP was weird and sometimes a frustrating experience that we'd not like to subject anyone to in the future. So all primary ammo weapons now have infinite ammo, but there are going to be some exceptions to this. So with Fighting Lion and Sweet Business, for example, so those exotic weapons, for example, are going to be tuned individually. So target farming Trials weapons is much more efficient in Season 15, and we've got some cool new perks for players to try, and we wanted to put on Trials weapons. So all Trials weapons available in Season 15, they are going to now have 7 perks in each column, and previously that was 5, so that's really, really good news. So when max power levels on weapons launched, and we reissued several weapons, we saw how frustrated players were at having to regrind for their favourite roles, and since the perk pools hadn't changed, based on that our reissuing guidelines for Season 13 onwards were to replace most of the perks, and it turns out that was an overcorrection, and certain perks with the original pools have become part of the identity of a weapon. So I think a really good example of that is the moon weapons. They certainly came back in a very lackluster state, so good to see that's not going to happen too much in the future. So moving forward, the guidelines for reissues will be able to remove the least useful 2-3 perks and add 2-3 newer perks that give the weapons new options and may result in an entirely new top tier role without removing the old one. And we have made some small adjustments to the weapons reissued in the 3.2.1 update to move these in the direction of the new issued guidelines. And if you're wondering why our community managers are asking for everyone's favourite roles, well, now you know. Added 1 or 2 original perks to each column for the lunar weapons, so that's really, really good. It looks like they've listened to the feedback on those moon weapons, and since these can be target farmed, we're okay with increasing the size of the perk pool in this case. So added 1 of the original perks to both columns for the Dreaming City weapons, reissued in 3.2.1, so that's Tiger Spite, Twilight Oath and Abide the Return. And since these can't be target farmed yet, in brackets, that's really interesting, we didn't want to increase the size of the pools by more than 1. Well, that's a few changes, but next up let's have a look at some archetypes. So note, exotics receive these changes as written unless otherwise mentioned in the exotics section below. So first of all, we're looking at breach grenade launchers. They're increasing as a pain point in PvP, and with the shotgun nerf we're seeing a small increase in usage. So this change aims to reduce the ease of getting big splash damage for primary or clean-up targets, and we'll watch how things change and make further adjustments in a future update if needed. Note that we're fine how they perform in PvE, so have compensated there. So reduce the blast radius by 0.4 meters. reduced splash damage by 20, and increased the damage in PvE by 12%, and Witherhoard is unaffected. So next up we got the machine gun changes. So machine gun usage is surprisingly high, and we felt that they weren't fulfilling their intended role in higher difficulty content. So ammo efficiency, ad clear, and secondary single target sustained damage. So they've increased the damage in PvE by 20%. Scout rifles and hand cannons have felt weaker than we'd like in PvE content for a while, so increased the damage versus miners by 15%. So fusion rifles have benefited indirectly from the mid-season 14 shotgun nerf, but fusion rifle subfamilies weren't as different from each other as we wanted, and weren't all useful in a variety of content. So we looked at all the options we had for diversifying them, and ended up with some substantial changes. This isn't intended to be a global buff to fusion rifles, but we expect these to be some better counters to other weapons than they were previously. Note, we also evaluated some other options, which are worth a bit of discussion. So, given the projectile's travel time, we did like the idea of this behaviour in Destiny 1, but on investigation, found that there are networking issues with firing rapid bursts and non-hit scan projectiles, and they didn't play as well as we wanted them to, and we may look at this again in the future. So burst rate of fire, this would have meant touching design data and audio for every fusion rifle we've ever shipped, well beyond the scope of what we wanted for this change, and also not that interesting of a change. Increase the PvE damage bonus such that all subfamilies have a 15% PvE bonus, previously high impact was 0%, precision and adaptive were 10%, and rapid fire was 12.5%. And push these subfamilies further apart, adjusting charge time shots fired between burst was 7 for all subfamilies, and damage, and note the base below means without battery perks, so charge time or masterwork, or the adept charge time mod. So here we go with the changes. So high impacts charge slower, and while still strong, require more planning to use effectively. So base charge time increased from 0.86 seconds to 1 second, and shots per burst reduced from 7 to 5. And reduce the total damage per burst. So in playtesting, we found that charging these in the open is super risky, but pre-charging around a corner, or otherwise in safety, is very effective. So with the reduced shots per burst, these are now less reliant on stability, so can stack a little bit more range. Precisions and adaptives are close to unchanged, and base charge time is unchanged, shots per burst is unchanged at 7, and very slightly increased total damage per burst. So, in playtesting, we feel these are very effective all round without stepping on the niches of high impacts and rapid fires, and I'll be keeping a good plug one for PvP. So next up, rapid fires, they charge faster, allowing them to be used reactively against charging enemies, or aggressively when pushing forward. So base charge time increased from 0.54 to 0.46 seconds, and shots per burst increased from 7 to 9, increased total damage per burst, and in playtesting, we found that these are very effective against shotgun rushers. The combination of them need to be closer, and you have a shorter charge time work really well together, and if you have good enough charge time, you can 2-blast with a rapid fire before a high impact user finishes charging there first. And with the increased shots per burst, these are now more reliant on stability, but with the increased damage they're less reliant on range. So parts of this work required adjusting several fusion rifle perks and one mod. So first of all, backup plans implementation was incompatible with the fusion rifle changes. We felt like the perk could use a rework anyway. So remove plus 100 to the charge time stat and adjust charge time multiplier from 0.85 to 0.7 and now scales damage by 0.8. Liquid coils and accelerated coils needed a rework for similar reasons. So both converted to scale charge time and damage instead of modifying the charge time stat, and the final effect is much the same as before, but these are now much more robust. However, they won't visibly change the charge time stat in the inspection screen. And the adept charge time mod felt pointless, and we felt like it would still balance against other mods if it didn't reduce damage. So change functionality to scale charge time directly instead of charging the charge time stat without adjusting the damage. So a note on the charge time masterwork, a fusion rifle's damage is determined by its charge time stat, similar to how most other weapons' damage is determined by the rate of fire stat. So masterworks can only increase the weapon stats for performance reasons, so it's not possible to change how charge time maps onto damage without big changes to how the charge time stat works. So we did investigate doing this by making the masterwork a perk, but it would cause a fusion rifle to exceed the perk budget, resulting in bad things happening, as mentioned in a previous TWAB. So with the fusion rifle rework, we feel that this masterwork is more viable, and it now rarely reduces bolts to kill, so it may not feel like a downgrade in the same way as before. So we are going to be watching to see how this plays out, and we've got some more options to address the issue if that is still needed. So adjusted the fusion rifle stat order so it matches other weapons, stability and handling were out of order. So this is a big change to fusion rifles, including all exotic fusion, so we're going to be watching for any major issues and we'll make tweaks as needed. Well, big changes there to fusion rifles, but next up we've got the exotics. So the Anarchy exotic grenade launcher has been dominant for years, and we're ignoring the season with the sweet grenade launcher artifact mods of course, and being near mandatory for certain raid bosses, combined with e.g. double slug shotguns, as well as excelling as a solo weapon for ad clears in some encounters. So we like that it's a great choice for hard solo content and trapping enemy spawns choke points, but we don't want it to remain part of the dominant tactic for boss damage, and particularly don't want it to be great for boss damage and ad clears in a single encounter. So with this change we expect it to remain strong without being borderline usable as a primary weapon. So reduce total reserve magazine ammunition from 26 to 16 and reduce damage by 30% versus bosses, and champions are not bosses. And next up we got Xenophage. So Xenophage was already top notch, didn't need to benefit from the global machine gun buff. It does benefit from the damage per bullet buff to machine guns, but now has a slower rate of fire to compensate, resulting in a slightly lower damage per second, but higher burst damage and sustained damage, since now it's more ammo efficient. So reduced rate of fire from 120 to 90 RPM, and receive less of a machine gun PvE damage buff. Well, Fighting Lion has always been fun but not dominant in PvE, so we weren't worried about the impact infinite ammo would have there. However, enabling fast, unlimited grenade spamming was too much in PvP based on internal playtests, so we've addressed that specific case without significantly impacting its feel in PvE. So Fighting Lion reserve ammo increased from a lot to infinite, and receives the same changes as other breach grenade launchers, and reduced the base reload stat to 0. So breach grenade launchers with the 0 reload stat reload very, very slowly, and now increase reload speed based on its previous level of damage multiple enemies with one grenade. Now increase reload speed to previous level on damaging multiple enemies with one grenade. So we're going to be keeping an eye on this, but we believe it's in a good place with this change, and you shouldn't be manually reloading Fighting Lion anyway. Well, next up we got a change to Vex Mythoclast. So we were cautious with tuning this one at launch, knowing that shipping a dominant weapon that has incredibly low ownership would break PvP, and aimed for a balanced but erring on the side of not letting it ship too strong. However, it fell short of balanced. Ownership is much higher now, and we want it to be a strong enough reward to be desirable from the Vault of Glass. So PvE damage bonus increased by 40%, range stat increased to near best in class for high impact auto rifles, increased the stability stat, reworked the catalyst to grant stability and damage after a kill, and increased the rate of fire from 360 to 390, and reduced the linear fusion rifle mode charge time from 820 to 533, so it's same as the standard linear fusion rifles, so no longer loses overcharge stacks on stow, except when in linear fusion rifle mode. Well, that is a massive buff to Vex Mythoclast there, so I'm definitely going to be chasing that. Next up, we've got Merciless, so we had to touch this one anyway because of the fusion rifle changes, and we figured if we're in there, we might as well make a buff that we've been thinking about. So update the perk to account for fewer shots per burst, should build up the charge rate at the same amount per burst as before, and reduce the damage penalty for increasing charge rate by 40%. Well, next up we got Yoten. So because of how the charge time stat works with the fusion rifle changes, we made a small change to avoid breaking this weapon. So in playtesting it makes almost no difference, but if I didn't mention it, someone would probably notice. So reducing the charge time from 0.82 seconds to 0.78, and slightly reduce the damage per shot. Bastion feels very strong with shotguns being less dominant, so we're preemptively adjusting it in PvP. It's also super low usage in PvE, so we're buffing it there too. So reduce the damage by 15%, can now not quite kill a Guardian with one shot in the 3 burst if it fires, increase the spread angle by 10%, and increase PvE damage by 25%. Then we got Sweet Business's perk refilling the magazine when picking up the primary ammo no longer works in a world without primary ammo, so it's been adjusted. Well, next up we've got some changes to perks. So Firing Line, we like the idea of this perk. It was just giving away a little bit too much damage almost for free. So reduce bonus damage to 20% precision damage for all supported weapon archetypes. It is highly variable depending on the weapon type. And we'll roll on some sniper rifles, linear fusion rifles, and machine guns, and maybe some other stuff in the future. Certain damage perks only affected impact damage on explosive weapons, and we've updated these specific perks to also increase detonation damage, so Kill Clip, Rampage, and also Adrenaline Junkie. And we fixed the incorrect rarity on some recently shipped weapon perks. Well, next up we've got VFX. So weapon VFX were all custom and some didn't meet our desired cool factor. So we've rebuilt these to speed up the process of adding new weapons or updating old ones, while updating the visuals at the same time. So updated all grenade launchers and rocket launchers VFX, and legendary fusion rifles and linear fusion rifles now have distinct damage type charge VFX. Well, next up, we've got the near future, so we're devoting a lot of time to the Witch Queen expansion at the moment, and there's a ton of things changing in a few weeks, so we want to see how things shake out before deciding on further tuning. And we'll be watching Season 15 launch closely, be ready to make some small adjustments as needed in the first half of the season. So the more distant future, but still before the Witch Queen, so linear fusion rifles and caster frame swords are still not where we want them to be, so expect some tweaks. And we're also looking at underused or underpowered exotics, and we'll be taking a pass at some of them, including Arbalest, Surus Regime, Cryosthesia 77K, Malfeasance and more. And if you have issues with spamming high rate of fire semi-automatic weapons as fast as possible, we've got something in the works for you. Priming a target and quickly swapping for a cleanup is easier than we'd like, and we're looking at options for building towards faster swap speeds, and we've got a step at hitting both of these points coming soon. Well, Witch Queen and beyond, we've talked previously about wanting legendary weapons to have more of an identity based on their source, and expect to ship a new system for this in or close to the Witch Queen. So in Season 15, we tweaked exotic primary weapons to generate ammo faster through ammo finder mods, and we've got another change planned to make them more enticing in hard PvE content. Well, that is all we've got for weapon changes for now, and we're looking forward to seeing how the PvP and PvE metas shape up once you've got your hands on them next week. So loads of update there, but next up we've got guns. So we're still holding on a lot of the details of Season of Redacted, although we do know now that is going to be called Season of the Lost, including the new Season 15 arsenal you're going to want to discover next week. But we do want to show off some other weapons you're going to be earning next season. So next season's ritual weapon is going to be a rocket launcher with the explosive light perk. So as is the custom, you can start to collecting Gambit, Crucible and Vanguard themed weapon ornaments by upgrading your rank on the vendors. So we're also adding 3 weapons as post-game rewards for completing Vanguard strikes, Gambit and Crucible matches. These will drop randomly after completing these activities with random rolls. So here is a sneak peek. We've also got plans to freshen up the loot pool for the Prophecy Dungeon. We've seen a lot of feedback to bring forward weapons that were awards from the original Trials of the 9, and thought that adding these 9 themed dungeon weapons was a great fit. So these weapons have been upgraded with random rolls, and certain ones will drop from specific encounters of the Prophecy Dungeon. So on top of all these weapons, we're also updating the world loot pool with some fresh drops. Here are some new weapons you can expect to start seeing popping up in the wild. Well, loads of changes to the weapons there. The fusion rifle changes are extensive, and it looks like Anarchy got away with a small nerf rather than the big nerf than we were expecting. Looks like machine guns and also hand cannons and scout rifles are going to be more viable option in PvE next season. Plus we got a sneak peek at the loot we're going to be able to start collecting next season, so really exciting stuff. So we're only a few days away now from the Witch Queen showcase on August the 24th. That is on Tuesday, and that's going to kick off here in the UK at 5 PM. But make sure you check your time zones all around the world. Really excited for that one. Well, I hope you enjoy it, and I'll definitely speak to you before then. But let me know down in the comments what you think of the weapon changes. And as always, thank you so much for watching. For more Destiny 2 content like this, hit that subscribe button down below and subscribe to This Week in Video Games. If you want to join the community, check out the Discord link in the description, or you can follow me on Twitter at TWIVG Podcast. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, liking and sharing the video would really help me out. Otherwise, check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks again. I'll see you soon.